5 tests every avoidant uses before catching feelings. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in a situation where someone seems interested in you, but then they pull back, they disappear, create distance, send mixed signals? Maybe that's you. Maybe you've built walls so high you're not even sure how to let someone in. The truth is, avoidants don't just fall into love. They test love. And if you don't understand these tests, you'll either get stuck in an emotional push-pull game, or if you're the avoidant, you'll sabotage something that could have been real. Today, we're going to break it down. The 5 tests every avoidant uses before they let themselves feel. An avoidant's first instinct when they start to feel something for someone isn't to lean in, it's to pull away. It's not because they don't care. And it's not because they're not interested. It's because their nervous system is wired to equate closeness with risk. The closer someone gets, the more exposed they feel. And for someone with an avoidant attachment style, exposure isn't about vulnerability in a healthy way. It's about potential loss of control. From an outsider's perspective, this can be incredibly confusing. One moment, everything seems great. The connection is building. The conversations are deep. The chemistry is undeniable. And then suddenly they go cold. They take longer to respond. They cancel plans. They seem distant and detached. It can feel like rejection, but in reality, it's a defense mechanism. Their mind is processing, testing, and making sure that stepping closer isn't a trap. Avoidants don't trust emotional intensity. If something feels too good, their first thought isn't, "This is amazing." Their first thought is, "What's the catch?" Their experiences, whether from childhood, past relationships, or even subconscious conditioning, have taught them that getting too close to someone means eventually getting hurt. So instead of embracing the connection, they instinctively create space to regulate their emotions. They need that distance to feel safe. It allows them to observe, assess, and regain a sense of control over their own emotions before they consider moving forward. This is where most people misinterpret the avoidance behavior. When an avoidant creates distance, a common reaction is to chase, to send more messages, to ask what's wrong, to push for closeness as a way to reassure both them and yourself. But this is the worst thing you can do, because the moment an avoidant feels pressure, their instinct to run only intensifies. They don't respond to force, they respond to ease. They need to feel like they can step back without being pulled forward against their will. What's happening internally for them is complex. They might genuinely like you, but that feeling conflicts with their internal programming. A part of them wants connection, but another part sees it as a risk. They aren't distancing themselves because they don't care. They're distancing themselves because caring too much is scary. And before they allow themselves to fall, they need proof that closeness won't cost them their sense of freedom. What often happens next is a period of self-reflection. When they create space, they start to notice something important, if they're still thinking about you. And that's when things shift, because if someone respects their space, doesn't push, and remains centered, it disrupts their expectations. They're used to people either chasing them or walking away entirely. But when someone stays present without pressuring them, they start to wonder, why am I still drawn to this person? That's the moment when their fear and curiosity collide. This is why the best response to an avoidance distance isn't to panic, it's to stay calm, to continue living your life, to maintain your own emotional stability. Because when they see that their space is respected, they feel safer coming back. If they sense that your happiness isn't dependent on their validation, they start to see you as someone who won't trap them emotionally. And that's key. Because avoidants don't necessarily want to be alone. They want to know that if they choose someone, they won't lose themselves in the process. The irony is that the moment they feel truly free to step away is often when they start stepping forward. Their attraction builds in absence. Their feelings grow in the space they create. And when they realize that their distance didn't break the connection, that's when they start to trust it. The real test isn't about whether they feel something for you. It's about whether they can feel safe while feeling something for you. Avoidants value their independence more than anything else. It's not just a preference, it's their emotional survival mechanism. From an early age, they learned that relying on others wasn't always safe, so they built a sense of self that thrives on autonomy. Relationships, while desirable in some ways, bring a major conflict: the fear of losing that independence. When an avoidant starts developing feelings for someone, one of the first things they do, consciously or unconsciously, is check whether this person threatens their autonomy. They don't just want connection, they need to know that connection won't come at the expense of their freedom. This is where the test begins. They might subtly withdraw to see how their partner reacts. They might prioritize their own routine, hobbies, or alone time, not because they don't care, but because they need to feel that their life is still their own. Most people misinterpret this behavior. They assume that distance means disinterest, but in reality, it's about control. Avoidants fear emotional enmeshment, where their needs, thoughts, and actions become entangled with another person's. They don't want to feel suffocated, and they certainly don't want to feel obligated. If a relationship starts to feel like it's dictating their choices, they instinctively push back. This is why avoidants often struggle in in relationships with partners who seek constant reassurance. If someone frequently asks, "Do you still like me?" or needs validation through daily check-ins and long conversations, an avoidant might start feeling trapped. It's not that they don't care about the person, they simply feel their freedom slipping away. The more they feel pressured to engage, the more their walls go up. This isn't about a lack of love, it's about self-preservation. Their independence check doesn't just apply to themselves, it extends to their partner as well. Avoidants don't just want space for themselves, they also feel safer with someone who has their own sense of independence. If they see that their partner has a strong, fulfilling life outside of the relationship, it reassures them that emotional reliance won't become a burden. They don't want to feel like they are responsible for someone else's happiness. That kind of pressure makes them retreat. This is why the most attractive thing to an avoidant is someone who is secure in their own life. If they see that their partner enjoys their own hobbies, has a solid social circle, and isn't emotionally dependent on the relationship, they feel less need to pull away. They start to believe that being in a relationship doesn't mean sacrificing themselves. On the other hand, if they sense that their partner's happiness hinges entirely on the relationship, it triggers their deepest fear, the loss of autonomy. They might start creating even more space, setting firmer boundaries, or even testing their partner's reaction by being emotionally unavailable. If their partner reacts with neediness, they see it as confirmation that the relationship will become suffocating. If their partner remains self-sufficient and respects their need for space, it builds trust instead of fear. What's interesting is that avoidants don't always realize they're running this test. To them, it just feels like protecting their sense of self. But underneath, they are asking an unspoken question: can I be with you without losing me? If the answer is yes, they start to let their guard down. They begin to associate closeness with safety instead of restriction. This is why patience is crucial with avoidants. Trying to force them into more connection than they're ready for will backfire. Instead, the best way to pass this test is to demonstrate that the relationship is an addition to life, not a takeover. That love isn't about possession, it's about choice. And when an avoidant truly believes that they can love without losing themselves, that's when they stop running. Avoidants have a complicated relationship with emotional vulnerability. On the surface, they may seem strong, independent, and unaffected by deep emotions. But beneath that exterior lies a different reality, one shaped by past experiences where opening up led to pain, disappointment, or rejection. Because of this, avoidants don't just let people in, they test whether someone is emotionally resilient enough to handle the way they navigate intimacy. This test isn't always conscious. It's not as if an avoidant sits down and plans to push someone away just to see what happens. Instead, it's an instinctive defense mechanism. When they start developing feelings, they subconsciously check whether the other person can handle their emotional walls without falling apart or making them feel guilty for needing space. One of the ways they do this is by withdrawing emotionally at unpredictable moments. They might be warm and affectionate one day, then distant and indifferent the next. To their partner, this inconsistency can feel confusing and even hurtful, but for the avoidant, it's an internal battle. They are struggling with their growing attachment, and their instinct tells them to step back before they get too close. The reaction they get from their partner in these moments is crucial. If their partner responds with anxiety, chasing, demanding answers, or needing constant reassurance, it reinforces their belief that closeness leads to pressure. In their mind, emotions become something overwhelming, something that needs to be managed, rather than freely experienced. This pushes them further away because it confirms their biggest fear, that opening up will cost them their sense of stability. On the other hand, if their partner remains steady, acknowledging the avoidant's need for space without personalizing it, it disrupts the avoidant's expectations. They are used to people either suffocating them with emotional demands or abandoning them entirely. But when someone stays calm and self-assured, the avoidant starts to feel safer. They begin to trust that emotional connection doesn't have to mean chaos. Another way avoidants test emotional resilience is by downplaying their own emotions or avoiding deep discussions. If they are feeling overwhelmed, they might shut down instead of expressing their concerns. They want to see how their partner reacts to their emotional detachment. Does their partner push for a conversation? Do they demand an explanation? Or do they create space while remaining available? The more their partner pressures them to talk before they're ready, the more resistant they become. What many people misunderstand about avoidance is that their emotional walls aren't about a lack of feelings, they are about fear. The fear of being consumed by emotions, the fear of losing control, the fear of being vulnerable and then regretting it. Because of this, they often choose partners who seem emotionally stable and self-reliant. They need to believe that if they let someone in, that person won't crumble under pressure. At times, an avoidant might even create conflict just to see how their partner handles it. They might make an offhanded remark that tests a boundary or withdraw affection to gauge the reaction. This isn't because they enjoy playing games, it's because they are testing the emotional strength of the person they're considering letting in. They need to see that emotions, both theirs and their partner's, won't become a battleground where they feel trapped or obligated to fix everything. The irony is that many avoidants crave deep connection. They want to feel safe enough to express their emotions, but they don't know how. So they test, they observe, they retreat and return, trying to decide if the person they are drawn to is strong enough to withstand their emotional hesitations. The key to passing this test isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about demonstrating stability. It's about showing the avoidant that emotions don't have to mean pressure, that closeness doesn't have to mean suffocation, and that love doesn't have to be a battlefield. When they see that someone can handle their hesitations without pushing or panicking, that's when they start to let their guard down. Avoidants don't just fear relationships, they fear repeating the past. Every avoidant has a story, even if they don't talk about it. Maybe it was a childhood where love felt conditional. Maybe it was a past relationship where they gave too much only to be left feeling drained or betrayed. Whatever the reason, they have learned to associate emotional closeness with potential pain. Because of this, when they start to develop feelings for someone new, they don't just embrace it, they test it. They look for signs, consciously or unconsciously, that this person will be different from what they've experienced before. At the core of this test is skepticism. Avoidants tend to believe that most relationships follow the same patterns and that history is bound to repeat itself. So when they meet someone who sparks real feelings, their first instinct isn't excitement, it's caution. They might think this feels good now, but how long before it turns into something suffocating? Or what's going to happen when they see the real me? This internal dialogue keeps them from diving in too quickly, even if the connection is strong. One way avoidants test whether someone is different is by being slow to trust words. Many people express love, commitment, and deep emotions early in relationships, but for an avoidant, words are cheap. They've likely heard grand promises before only to be disappointed when actions didn't match. Because of this, they won't fully believe someone's intentions just because they sound good. Instead, they watch, they observe patterns over time, they note whether the person follows through, whether they remain consistent, whether they respect boundaries even when emotions are high. Another way this test plays out is through emotional distancing. Avoidants often create space, not just to protect themselves, but to see how the other person reacts. If someone panics, chases, or tries to force closeness, it confirms their fear that relationships are needy and overwhelming. If, however, the person remains steady, giving them space but staying present, it challenges their expectations. It shows them that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. Avoidants also have a tendency to compare new relationships to past ones, sometimes without even realizing it. They might see small behaviors in their partner and assume they are warning signs, even if they aren't. If an ex was overly controlling, they may be hypersensitive to even the slightest suggestion from a new partner. If they once felt smothered, they may misinterpret genuine affection as an attempt to trap them. This is why patience is crucial. Avoidants aren't just getting to know a new person. They are constantly measuring them against a history they are trying not to repeat. At times, an avoidant might even push boundaries to see what happens. They might cancel plans last minute, become unresponsive for a few days, or subtly test whether their partner will react in a way that reminds them of past pain. They aren't doing this maliciously. It's a subconscious defense mechanism, a way to reassure themselves that they won't end up stuck in another unhealthy dynamic. They need to see that their partner won't react with anger, desperation, or ultimatums. What avoidants are really searching for in this test is emotional consistency. They need to see that love won't turn into something unstable. They need to feel that they won't be punished for needing space or for being cautious. And most importantly, they need to trust that if they open up, it won't be used against them later. The irony is that the more someone tries to prove they are different, the more an avoidant might resist. Grand gestures, constant reassurance, and emotional intensity can actually make them retreat further. The only thing that truly passes this test is time and steady, unwavering behavior. When an avoidant sees that a person remains true to themselves regardless of emotional highs and lows, they slowly start to believe that they aren't just reliving the past. They begin to trust, not because they were convinced, but because they saw the proof unfold in a way they couldn't deny. At some point in a growing connection, an avoidant will test whether you will leave. This isn't because they want you to go, but because they are trying to confirm their deepest fear, that you will. Avoidants often carry a belief, whether conscious or subconscious, that love is temporary. Maybe they grew up in an environment where emotional support was inconsistent. Maybe they've been in relationships where closeness led to pain. Whatever the case, they don't just fear abandonment, they expect it. And because of this, they sometimes create situations that push people away, just to see if it happens. One way they do this is by withdrawing emotionally, especially when things are going well. Just when the relationship starts to feel safe, they may suddenly become distant, stop responding as much, or seem colder than before. This can feel confusing to their partner, who might wonder, did I do something wrong? But in reality, this isn't about the partner at all. It's an unconscious way for the avoidant to see, will they still be here if I stop giving them what they want? Another way they test this is by pulling away physically. They might cancel plans, spend more time alone, or prioritize work and hobbies over the relationship. This isn't because they don't care. It's because they need to know that if they take space, the relationship won't collapse. They want to see if their partner can handle their need for distance without overreacting. Sometimes they even create conflict. They might bring up a small issue and escalate it into something bigger than necessary just to see how their partner reacts. If the partner responds with anger, desperation, or an ultimatum, it confirms their fear that relationships always lead to drama. But if the partner remains calm, sets healthy boundaries, and doesn't feed into the chaos, it disrupts their expectations. It makes them question, maybe this person really won't leave. Avoidants also tend to test people by revealing a part of themselves that they believe is unlovable. This could be something from their past, a flaw they feel ashamed of, or a side of them they've been afraid to show. When they do this, they're not necessarily looking for reassurance. They're waiting to see if their partner will judge them, react negatively, or see them differently. If that happens, it reinforces their belief that intimacy always leads to rejection. But if their partner responds with understanding and acceptance, it creates a small crack in the wall they've built. Perhaps the most painful way they test people is by making them feel unwanted. Sometimes an avoidant will act indifferent, avoid saying affectionate words, or make it seem like they don't care as much as they do. This isn't because they lack feelings, it's because they want to see if their partner will leave when they aren't actively giving love. Deep down, they want someone who stays even when they aren't constantly proving their worth. What avoidants don't always realize is that these tests can become self-sabotage. In trying to confirm their fear of abandonment, they sometimes push away people who would have stayed. They don't do this because they want to lose love, but because they are protecting themselves from what they believe is inevitable. The only way to pass this test is with patience, consistency, and emotional strength. The key isn't to chase them or prove that you won't leave. It's to remain steady, respect their need for space, and show through actions, not words, that love doesn't have to mean loss. When an avoidant finally realizes that someone isn't going anywhere unless they push them away, that's when the fear starts to fade. That's when they begin to trust, not because they were told to, but because they've seen it with their own eyes. Avoidants don't just struggle with relationships, they struggle with the idea of needing someone. To them, dependence feels like a weakness, something that puts them at risk of losing control over their own lives. Because of this, when they start developing feelings for someone, they test whether the relationship will allow them to maintain their self-sufficiency. One of the ways they do this is by keeping emotional and physical distance, even when they have strong feelings. They might deliberately avoid too much closeness, not because they don't want it, but because they need to prove to themselves that they can live without it. If they feel like they are becoming too emotionally reliant on someone, they instinctively pull back to regain a sense of control. This can be frustrating for their partner, who may feel like they're being kept at arm's length. It can seem like the avoidant isn't as invested in the relationship, but that isn't necessarily true. It's not that they don't care, it's that they are afraid of becoming dependent on that care. The moment they feel like they need someone, their alarm system goes off. They worry that if they rely too much on another person, they will lose their independence, their ability to walk away, or even their sense of self. Another way avoidants test for self-sufficiency is by observing how their partner handles their own emotions. They are drawn to people who are emotionally stable and don't rely on constant reassurance. If their partner frequently needs validation, gets upset when they take space, or struggles with emotional regulation, it can reinforce the avoidant's fear that relationships come with too much responsibility. They don't want to feel like they have to take care of someone else's emotions while also managing their own fears about closeness. Avoidants also look for signs that their partner can function independently. If they see that their partner has their own life, hobbies, friendships, and a sense of fulfillment outside the relationship, it reassures them. It tells them that being together won't mean sacrificing personal space or freedom. On the other hand, if they sense that their partner's happiness depends entirely on them, it makes them wary. They fear that the relationship will become an emotional burden rather than a source of support. At times, they may even create distance intentionally to see what happens. They might go a few days without texting or make last-minute changes to plans. This isn't necessarily because they want to be alone, it's because they want to see if their partner reacts with calmness or panic. If their partner handles the space with ease, they start to feel safer. But if their partner reacts with anxiety or pressure, it reinforces their belief that relationships demand too much and take away their freedom. The irony is that avoidants often crave deep connection just as much as anyone else. They want to feel close, but they don't want to feel trapped. They need to know that if they choose to let someone in, they won't lose themselves in the process. And the only way they can believe that is if they see proof that love doesn't have to mean dependence, that closeness doesn't have to mean control, and that a relationship can exist without compromising their independence. This is why the best way to navigate a relationship with an avoidant is through balance. They don't need to be chased or convinced to stay. They need to see that their partner is strong and secure, that they can handle both connection and distance with equal ease. The moment an avoidant realizes that love doesn't mean losing control, that's when they finally stop running. That's when they begin to trust not just their partner, but themselves. Avoidants have a deep-seated fear of losing their independence in relationships. To them, self-sufficiency is not just a preference, it is a necessity. When they start developing feelings for someone, they instinctively test whether they can maintain their autonomy within the relationship. They need to know that being close to someone won't mean losing themselves or being forced into emotional dependence. One way they test this is by creating distance, even when things are going well. They may suddenly become less available, cancel plans, or withdraw emotionally. This isn't because they've lost interest, but because they want to see if they can take space without the relationship falling apart. If their partner reacts with panic or insecurity, it reinforces their belief that relationships demand too much and threaten their freedom. However, if their partner remains calm and respects their need for space, it reassures them that the relationship won't take over their life. Avoidants are also highly observant of how their partner handles their own emotions. They feel more comfortable with people who are emotionally independent and don't rely on constant reassurance. If they sense that their partner is too emotionally dependent, frequently seeking validation or reacting strongly to small shifts in behavior, it triggers their fear of being responsible for someone else's feelings. They do not want to feel like they have to manage both their own emotional struggles and those of their partner. Another way they test for self-sufficiency is by evaluating how their partner spends their time outside the relationship. They feel more at ease when their partner has their own hobbies, friendships, and interests because it shows that the relationship is a part of their life, not the center of it. If their partner seems overly reliant on the relationship for happiness, it makes them feel trapped. They want a partner who enhances their life, not someone who expects them to be their sole source of fulfillment. Sometimes avoidants will pull back unexpectedly just to see how their partner reacts. If the partner pressures them to return or questions their commitment, it confirms their fears that relationships mean sacrificing personal freedom. But if the partner maintains their own life and remains steady, it helps the avoidant feel safer. They need proof that love doesn't mean control, and the only way they can trust the relationship is by seeing that it allows them to keep their independence while still staying connected. In conclusion, understanding the intricacies of avoidant behavior is crucial for fostering healthier, more empathetic relationships. When you recognize that their tests are rooted in fear of dependency, past pain, and a deep need for self-sufficiency, you can respond with patience, understanding, and emotional strength. Avoidants aren't pushing people away because they don't care. They're testing the depth and stability of the connection to ensure it won't cost them their sense of freedom. By demonstrating consistency, respect for their space, and emotional resilience, you create a safe environment where they can truly open up. Thank you all for your time and attention. I appreciate you taking the steps towards growth and deeper understanding in your relationships. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and remember that real change starts with a deeper awareness of how we connect with others.